The bridge of the Relentless hummed with quiet activity as Captain Marcus Volkov reviewed patrol reports. His fleet had been stationed at the outer rim for 3 months now, monitoring the edge of human territory. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. The stars beyond the view screen looked peaceful, almost inviting. That peace was about to shatter. A sharp beep cut through the silence. Lieutenant Torres at the communications station straightened suddenly. Her fingers flew across her console and her face went pale. "Captain, we're receiving a distress signal. It's coming from Sector 7903. The signal is weak but continuous." Volkov rose from his chair and moved to stand behind Torres. "Origin?" "Unknown, sir. The encryption is alien. Not from any species we've encountered before." Torres adjusted her headset and frowned. "Wait, I'm getting something. The computer is translating now." The bridge speakers crackled to life. A voice came through, weak and broken. It spoke in halting English, clearly learned from human broadcasts. "Please, anyone, we are dying. They are killing us. Billions dead. Please help. We know you are new to the stars. We know you may not care. But please, we have children too." The bridge went silent. Every crew member had stopped what they were doing. The desperation in that voice cut deeper than any weapon. Volkov's jaw tightened. "Torres, can you get a visual?" "Trying now, sir. The signal is degrading fast." The main view screen flickered and resolved into a grainy image. A creature appeared unlike anything they had seen before. It had 4 arms, smooth gray skin, and large eyes that reflected deep intelligence and deeper pain. Behind it, smoke and flames filled what looked like a ship's interior. "I am Treasurer Ilan of the Velen Republic," the creature said. Blood leaked from a wound on its shoulder. "We sent our fastest ship to reach anyone who might listen. The Galactic Council has refused to help us. They say interference would violate their protocols. They say the strong have always dominated the weak. This is how the galaxy works, they told us." Ilan coughed, and more blood appeared on its uniform. "The Krynoth Dominion came 6 months ago. They did not negotiate. They did not offer terms. They simply began destroying our worlds. We tried to fight. Our military was crushed in days. They are superior in every way. They have better weapons, better shields, better ships. We stood no chance." The image shook as the ship Ilan was on took damage. Alarms blared in the background. "We have lost 47 worlds. Billions dead. Billions more in chains, taken as slaves. Our homeworld will fall within weeks. I know humanity is new to galactic civilization. I know we have nothing to offer you. But I beg you, please help us, please." The view screen went dark. Torres looked up with tears in her eyes. "Sir, the ship just exploded. Sensors showed debris expanding from the coordinates. There are no life signs." Volkov stood perfectly still for a long moment. His crew watched him, waiting. Finally he spoke, his voice cold as deep space. "Get me Admiral Kane, Priority Alpha Channel. Tell her we have a situation." Within 10 minutes, Admiral Rebecca Kane's face appeared on the view screen. She was in her office on Mars Station, surrounded by star maps and tactical displays. Her gray hair was pulled back tight, and her eyes held the hardness of someone who had fought in the border wars. "This better be important, Marcus. I was about to sit down to my first hot meal in 2 days. Admiral, we just received a distress call from an unknown alien species. They're being wiped out by something called the Krynoth Dominion." Volkov sent her the recording. Kane watched in silence. When it ended, she leaned back in her chair. "The Galactic Council refused to help them?" "Yes, ma'am. According to the alien, they cited non-interference protocols." Kane's expression turned to stone. "How convenient. Send me everything you have. I'm convening an emergency session of the Defense Committee." "Stand by for orders." The connection ended. Volkov turned to his crew. "All hands battle stations. I want every ship in our patrol group ready to jump on my command. This isn't a drill." 2 hours later, something appeared on the edge of the system. A ship barely holding together limped through the jump point. It was small, elegant in design despite the terrible damage it had taken. Scorch marks covered its hull and atmosphere vented from a dozen breaches. "Captain, that ship is hailing us," Torres said. "They're requesting emergency docking permission." "Granted." "Medical teams to Docking Bay 3. Tell them to prepare for alien physiology." Volkov headed for the hangar deck himself. When the alien ship's hatch opened, 4 Velens stumbled out. They wore what looked like diplomatic robes, now torn and burned. The leader, an elderly Velen with deep purple markings on its face, approached Volkov. It moved with dignity despite obvious pain. "I am Ambassador Ilan. My cousin who sent the message did not survive. I apologize for intruding on your territory. We will leave as soon as our ship is repaired. We assumed, like the Council, that you would not wish to involve yourselves in our extinction." Volkov studied the alien. He saw exhaustion, grief, and the acceptance of death. This being had already given up hope. "Ambassador, I need to understand something. This Kryneth Dominion, what do they want?"
"Slaves, resources, territory. They are an empire built on conquest."
"The weak exist only to serve the strong. This is their belief." Ilan's voice carried centuries of sadness. Every few decades they choose a new target. This time it was us. Next time it will be someone else. The galaxy accepts this as normal. The strong survive. The weak perish. This is the way things are. And what about your children? Your families? Ilan's large eyes filled with moisture. Taken. Scattered across Krynoth slave worlds. My own daughter is somewhere in their empire. I will never see her again. This is the price of being weak in a galaxy of predators. Volkov felt something cold settle in his chest. He had felt it before, during the border wars when pirates had raided Earth colonies. It was a dangerous feeling, one that made men do terrible things. But sometimes terrible things needed doing. "Ambassador, you've made a mistake in your assumptions about humanity." Ilan bowed its head. "I understand. We will leave. Thank you for your kindness in hearing us. It is more than the Council provided. At least we can say someone listened before the end." "No, you misunderstand." Volkov's voice dropped to something harsh and cold. "You assumed we wouldn't help because we're new to the galaxy, because we don't know the rules, because we're not strong enough. But you don't understand what you've just done. You asked a Deathworlder for help. You asked the species from Earth where everything wants to kill you, where survival means fighting every single day. We don't negotiate with slavers, Ambassador. We don't accept that might makes right. We end them." Ilan stared at him. "But you cannot win. The Kryneth have thousands of ships. Their warriors are bred for combat. Their weapons are beyond anything you possess. You would be destroyed." A grim smile crossed Volkov's face. "Maybe. But they're about to learn something about humans. We're really, really bad at accepting things we don't like, and we're even worse at backing down from bullies." His communicator chimed. Admiral Kane's face appeared. "Marcus, the Defense Committee has voted. Unanimous decision. We're mobilizing the fleet, all of it. 200 ships will be jumping to Velen space within 6 hours. The Krynoth wanted a fight. They're about to get one." Ilan collapsed to its knees. "But why?" "We have nothing to offer you. We cannot repay this debt. Why would you risk your entire civilization for strangers?" Volkov helped the ambassador to its feet. "Because someone has to. Because we've been where you are. Because we know what it's like when no one comes to help. And because the Krynoth made one critical mistake." "What mistake?" "Our intelligence just intercepted their communications. They've already marked our colony worlds as their next targets. They called humans a primitive species ripe for harvesting. They threatened our children, Ambassador. They threatened Earth." Volkov's eyes turned hard as diamonds. "This isn't a rescue mission anymore. This is total war, and the Krynoth are about to learn what happens when you threaten a Deathworld species. They're about to learn what humanity does to monsters. We become bigger monsters." The relentless engines fired up, preparing for the jump. Across human space, 200 warships did the same. Humanity was going to war, and the galaxy would never be the same. The human fleet emerged from the jump point like vengeful ghosts. 200 warships, their weapons already hot, their shields at maximum. Captain Volkov stood on the bridge of the Relentless and stared at the horror before him. The Velen home system was a graveyard. Thousands of destroyed ships floated in the void, their crews long dead. Orbital stations burned, spilling atmosphere and bodies into space, and surrounding it all, the Krynoth blockade fleet sat like fat predators over a kill. "Sir, we're being hailed," Torres said. "The Krynoth are demanding our identification." "Put them through." The view screen lit up with the image of a massive creature. The Krynoth war commander stood over 3 meters tall, covered in thick armored plates that looked like natural bone. 4 arms, each tipped with claws, gestured as it spoke. Its face was a nightmare of fangs and cold, calculating eyes. This was War Commander Thulgrim, leader of the Krynoth 7th Fleet. "Unknown vessels, you have entered a restricted combat zone. Identify yourselves immediately or be destroyed. The Velen species is property of the Krynoth Dominion. Interference will not be tolerated." Volkov studied the creature. He had seen monsters before. Earth had plenty. But this thing wore its cruelty like a badge of honor. This is Captain Marcus Volkov of the Terran Defense Fleet. We're here to discuss your immediate withdrawal from this system. Thulgrim laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Terran? The primitive species from that backwater death world? We have analyzed your vessels. Your technology is inferior. Your numbers are insufficient. You will surrender immediately, or we will add your species to our collection. Your worlds will make fine additions to the Dominion. I see. Before we discuss surrender, I'd like to show you something. Volkov nodded to Torres, who began broadcasting a data package. That's Earth, our homeworld. Take a good look. The transmission showed Earth in all its terrifying glory. Category 5 hurricanes that could flatten cities, volcanoes that could alter global climates, earthquakes that could sink continents, animals that could kill with venom, claws, fangs, or sheer size. And through it all, humans thriving, adapting, conquering their own world through pure stubborn determination. That's where we come from, War Commander. Everything on that planet tried to kill us for millions of years. We survived. We thrived. We became the apex predator of a world that specializes in apex predators. So here's our counteroffer. Leave now. Leave this system, leave these people alone, and we might let you live. Or stay and learn exactly why we're called Deathworlders. Thulgrim's expression twisted into something between amusement and rage. You dare threaten the Dominion? You are 200 ships. We are 500. Your threats are empty. You will submit or you will die. Volkov's smile was cold and sharp. Wrong answer. All ships weapons free. Show them what Earth sends to bullies. The human fleet exploded into action, but not in the way the Krynoth expected. Civilized species fought in formations with careful tactics and measured responses. They valued their ships and crews. They retreated when outmatched. Humans did none of these things. The first wave of human attack craft screamed toward the Krynoth lines at speeds that should have torn them apart. They didn't fire long-range weapons. They closed to point-blank range and unleashed everything. Missiles, railguns, lasers, and kinetic weapons designed to punch through armor. When their weapons ran dry, they rammed. Thulgrim watched in disbelief as a human fighter craft, engines trailing fire, slammed into the bridge of a Krynoth destroyer. The impact killed the fighter pilot instantly. It also killed everyone on the destroyer's bridge. The ship tumbled out of formation, vulnerable. 3 more human ships pounced on it like wolves on wounded prey. What are they doing? Thulgrim roared. They're sacrificing their own vessels. This is insane. His second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Vakran, studied the tactical display with growing unease. War Commander, they're not following any known combat doctrine. They're using ramming tactics. They're ignoring their own casualties. They're fighting like cornered animals. Then we'll put them down like animals. All ships advance. Crush them. But the human fleet wasn't breaking. For every ship they lost, they took 2 Krynoth vessels with them. Human boarding pods launched. Magnetic clamps pulling them toward Krynoth hulls. The pods latched on and burned through armor with plasma cutters. What came next was worse. Lieutenant Jackson Cross led the first boarding team onto a Krynoth carrier. His Marines wore heavy armor and carried weapons that looked primitive compared to Krynoth technology. But what they lacked in sophistication, they made up for in brutality. They fought in ways no civilized species would consider. The Krynoth warriors stood over 2 meters tall and had natural weapons built into their bodies. They were bred for combat, trained from birth to kill. They outnumbered the human boarding team 3-1. It didn't matter. Jackson's team moved through the Krynoth ship like a storm of violence. They used explosives to breach bulkheads. They fought in zero gravity as easily as on solid ground. When ammunition ran low, they used knives. When knives broke, they used their hands. The Krynoth had never faced an enemy that refused to die when it should. One Krynoth warrior managed to tear Jackson's helmet off. The human should have died in the vacuum. Instead, Jackson held his breath, crushed the warrior's throat with his bare hands, and took its breathing apparatus. He kept fighting for another 2 minutes before his team could get him to safety. They're insane, Vakran whispered as he watched footage from the carrier. They don't fear death. They welcome it. Thulgrim's confidence was cracking. All ships concentrate fire on their command vessel. Kill their leader and they'll break. The Krynoth fleet focused everything on the Relentless. Hundreds of weapons carved through space. The human dreadnought's shields flared and failed. Armor boiled away under the onslaught. The ship was dying. Captain shields are down. Hull breaches on decks 4-9. We're venting atmosphere. Engines are critical. Torres reported the damage with remarkable calm. Volkov watched his ship die around him. All hands, this is the captain. We've taken critical damage. I'm not ordering anyone to stay. Anyone who wants to evacuate, the shuttles are ready. I won't think less of you. Not a single person moved from their station. Torres looked at him with fierce determination. Sir, with respect, we're not going anywhere. If this ship is dying, we're taking as many of those bastards with us as we can. The crew's loyalty hit Volkov harder than any weapon. He nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Then he turned to his weapons officer. Target their flagship. All remaining missiles. Everything we have left. Sir, at this range we'll catch ourselves in the blast. I know, fire. The Relentless unleashed its final barrage. Missiles streaked toward the Krynoth flagship, and this time, there was nowhere for it to hide. The warheads detonated against the flagship's hull, and secondary explosions rippled through its structure. The massive vessel broke apart, pieces spinning into the void. War Commander Thulgrim died without ever understanding what had killed him. The explosion caught the Relentless as well. The blast wave hammered the crippled dreadnought, but somehow it held together. Volkov pulled himself up from where the impact had thrown him. Status. We're alive, sir, barely. Life support is on emergency power. But sensors show the Krynoth fleet is breaking off. They're retreating. Ambassador Ilan appeared on the communications channel from one of the human escort ships. The Velen's face showed a mixture of awe and horror. Captain Volkov, we're detecting Krynoth survivors floating in space. What are your orders? Volkov thought about the billions of Velens killed. About the children in chains. About Ilan's daughter somewhere in a Krynoth slave camp. Rescue them. Take prisoners. We're not them. We're humans. We have rules, even in war. But they would not do the same for you. I know. That's what makes us different. That's what makes us human. A Velen scientist named Pyrrha, who had been monitoring the battle from a support ship, contacted Volkov directly. Captain, I must understand. You lost 15 ships. Over 3,000 humans died. You won, but the cost was terrible. Why did you fight so hard? Why did you sacrifice so much for people you barely know? Jackson, now back aboard the Relentless with his surviving Marines, answered before Volkov could. His armor was scorched and dented, covered in both human and alien blood, because no one else would. Because the galaxy sat back and watched you die. Because sometimes the only thing standing between good people and monsters is someone willing to become a monster themselves. But there are more Krynoth ships coming, Pyrrha said. Our sensors detected a massive fleet heading this way. Over 2,000 vessels. They will arrive in 2 days. You cannot win against those numbers. Volkov looked at his battered ship, at his exhausted crew, at the debris field surrounding them. He thought about Earth, about humanity's long history of fighting impossible odds. They had survived ice ages and plagues. They had fought wars that killed millions and came back stronger. They had conquered their own deadly world through sheer determination. Maybe we can't win, he said quietly. But we're going to try, because that's what Deathworlders do. We don't give up. We don't surrender. We fight until we win, or until there's nothing left to fight with. And right now we've got plenty of fight left. Admiral Kane's face appeared on the view screen. Behind he, deep beneath the surface of Mars, in a bunker built to survive anything short of planetary destruction, Earth's military command gathered in emergency session. General Nathan Bryce stood before a holographic display showing the Velen system. Red icons represented the incoming Krynoth fleet. 2,000 ships, maybe more. Blue icons showed human forces. 200 damaged ships with another 100 reinforcements on the way. The math was brutal and simple. They couldn't win. Conventional warfare is suicide, said Admiral Kane, her voice tired but steady. Even if every human ship takes out 7 enemy vessels, we still lose. We need something else, something they won't expect. Bryce pulled up a classified file. Protocol Hornet's Nest. It was developed during the border wars but deemed too extreme for use against human opponents. The basic concept is simple. We can't match them ship to ship, so we don't try. We turn the entire system into a weapon. The hologram shifted, showing thousands of small dots swarming around larger vessels. Unmanned drones. Cheap, fast, and deadly. Each one carries a nuclear charge powerful enough to cripple a capital ship. We build thousands of them, hide them throughout the system, and when the Krynoth arrive, we activate them all at once. That's mass production on an impossible scale, said Defense Minister Rodriguez. We'd need factories running at maximum capacity. We'd need resources we don't have. Then we strip every mining operation, every shipyard, every industrial facility in human space, Kane said. We have 48 hours. We don't need them to be pretty. We just need them to work. The vote was unanimous. Within hours, every human factory from Earth to the outer colonies received the same order. Build drones. Build them fast. Build them deadly. The entire human industrial machine pivoted to a single purpose with frightening efficiency. In the Velen system, Captain Volkov reviewed the battle plan. It was insane. It relied on timing, luck, and the enemy doing exactly what humans predicted. But insane plans were humanity's specialty. Lieutenant Torres, start deploying the sensor drones. I want them hidden in every asteroid, every debris field, every moon. The Kryneth won't be able to sneeze without us knowing about it. Aye, sir. Deploying now. Jackson stood in the training bay with 50 Velen volunteers. They looked terrified. They should be. He was about to teach them something their species had never learned in 10,000 years of peaceful existence. He was about to teach them how to kill. Listen up, Jackson's voice echoed in the bay. I know you're scared. That's good. Fear keeps you alive. But fear also paralyzes, and paralyzed soldiers are dead soldiers. So we're going to take that fear and turn it into something useful. A young Velen named Torin raised one of his 4 hands. How do you do that? How do you control fear? You don't control it. You ride it. Fear makes your heart pump faster, makes you stronger, makes you think quicker. It's your body preparing for a fight. So when you feel afraid, you lean into it. You let it fuel you. Jackson pulled up training footage from human military history. Watch this. The Velens watched as human soldiers charged through gunfire, scaled walls under impossible conditions, and kept fighting even when wounded. Pyrrha, who had joined the training session, spoke quietly. They look like they enjoy it, like they're smiling while fighting. Some of them are, Jackson admitted, not because they like killing, because they've accepted that they might die, and once you accept that, fear loses its power. You become dangerous. You become unpredictable. You become human. The training began. Jackson pushed the Velens hard, deliberately putting them in stressful situations. Loud noises, confined spaces, simulated combat. Their natural instinct was to flee or freeze. He had to break that instinct and rebuild it into something else. Torin collapsed after the 3rd drill, gasping. I cannot do this. My body is not built for this kind of stress. Jackson pulled him to his feet. Your body will do what you tell it to do. Pain is just weakness leaving. Fear is just fuel burning. Now get up and try again. But why? Why do humans train this way? It seems cruel. Because when the real fight comes, you won't have time to think. Your training takes over. Your body knows what to do even when your mind is screaming. That's how you survive. Now, again. Ambassador Ilan watched from the observation deck. The Velen diplomat had seen many things in a long life, but watching its people transform into warriors disturbed something deep inside. Volkov joined the ambassador, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Your people are doing well, Volkov said. They are becoming like you. I am not certain this is a good thing. Ilan accepted the coffee but didn't drink. Humans seem almost eager for battle. Your Lieutenant Jackson teaches our people to embrace violence. Is this truly necessary? Volkov was quiet for a moment. Let me tell you something about Earth, Ambassador. We've been fighting each other for our entire history. Wars that killed millions were just another Tuesday for us. We fought over land, resources, religion, ideology, sometimes just because we didn't like each other. You know what we learned from all that blood? What? How to win. How to survive when survival seems impossible. How to turn fear into fuel and pain into power. We learned that sometimes the only way to stop a monster is to become something the monster fears. Volkov took a sip of his coffee. Your people were peaceful for thousands of years. That's beautiful. That's admirable. But it also made you vulnerable. The galaxy is full of predators, and predators don't respect peace. They respect strength. So we must become like the Krynoth? Violent and cruel? No, you become like us. We're violent when we need to be, but we choose when to fight. The Krynoth fight because they enjoy domination. We fight because someone has to protect the people who can't protect themselves. There's a difference. Down in the training bay, Torin successfully completed a drill. He stood there, breathing hard, and then he smiled. It was a small thing, but Jackson recognized it. That was the smile of someone who had just discovered they were stronger than they thought. That was the smile of someone who had conquered their fear. That was the beginning of a warrior. Pyrrha approached Jackson after the session. The Velen scientist carried a data pad filled with human military history files. I have been studying your species' conflicts. The numbers are disturbing. In your Second World War alone, over 60 million humans died. That's more than the entire current population of my homeworld. Yeah, that was a bad one. But you kept fighting. For years. Even when cities were destroyed. Even when millions died. You never surrendered. Why? Jackson cleaned his rifle as he answered. Because the alternative was worse. Because sometimes you fight not because you want to, but because you have to. Because evil only wins when good people do nothing. He looked at Pyrrha. The Kreenoth think they're the apex predators of the galaxy. They've never met a species that fought wars like humans do. They're about to get an education. The drone factories worked around the clock. In orbit around Earth, massive industrial stations pumped out attack drones by the thousands. Each drone was simple, barely more than an engine, a warhead, and basic sensors. But they didn't need to be sophisticated. They just needed to be numerous and deadly. 40 hours after receiving the order, 10,000 drones were ready. 20 hours after that, another 15,000. They were loaded onto transport ships and jumped to the Velen system in waves. Human crews worked without sleep, hiding the drones throughout the system. Inside asteroids, attached to debris, floating in planetary rings. Anywhere the Kreenoth wouldn't think to look. Volkov watched the deployment from the repaired bridge of the Relentless. How many do we have now? 28,000 drones deployed, sir. Another 7,000 arriving within the hour. We're also setting up false sensor readings. The Kreenoth will think the signatures are just debris or sensor ghosts. Good. What about the real surprise? Torres smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. The asteroid base is ready, sir. 50 missiles with plasma warheads. When the Kreenoth fleet passes through the belt, they'll get a surprise they won't forget. Assuming they fall for it. They will, sir. Humans have been setting ambushes for 50,000 years. We're good at it. 6 hours before the Kreenoth arrival, Volkov called all ship commanders to a virtual briefing. Faces appeared on his screen, human and Velen alike. They all looked exhausted. They all looked determined. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored allies, Volkov began. In 6 hours, the biggest enemy fleet in Kreenoth history is going to arrive in this system. They're coming to finish what they started. They're coming to destroy us and enslave your people. They think this will be easy. They think we're already beaten. They're wrong. He pulled up the tactical display. We're not going to fight them ship to ship. We're going to make them fight on our terms, in an environment we control. We've turned this entire system into a trap. Every asteroid is a potential weapon. Every piece of debris might be hiding a drone. They'll be looking for a fleet battle. Instead, they're going to get a nightmare. Admiral Kane's image appeared. The reinforcements from Earth have arrived. 100 fresh ships with full ammunition and eager crews. Total human forces now number 300 vessels. Still outnumbered, still outgunned, but we're not here to win a fair fight. We're here to make them bleed for every meter or Volko. The Kreenoth Armada filled the view screens like a metal storm. 2,300 warships arranged in perfect formations that spoke of absolute confidence. At the center, the massive command dreadnought Eternal Dominion dwarfed every other vessel. Its weapons could glass planets. Its shields could withstand sustained bombardment from entire fleets. War Commander Thulgrim commanded from its bridge, reviewing the tactical situation with satisfaction. Sensors report only 300 human vessels, War Commander, his tactical officer reported. They're deployed throughout the system in scattered positions. This is not a battle formation. They appear disorganized. Thulgrim studied the display. Inferior tactics from an inferior species. They spread their forces too thin, trying to protect everything. They will protect nothing. All ships advance to the inner system. Destroy any resistance. Today we teach the galaxy what happens to those who defy the Dominion. The Kreenoth fleet moved forward, engines burning bright against the darkness. They entered the asteroid belt without hesitation. Why would they fear rocks in space? Their shields could deflect any debris. Their sensors could detect any threat. They never saw the drones. Hidden inside asteroids, attached to debris, floating dormant in the silence, 28,000 attack drones waited. Each one was barely larger than a coffin, packed with explosives and a simple targeting system. They were crude weapons by galactic standards. But crude didn't mean ineffective. Captain Volkov watched the Kreenoth fleet advance deeper into the trap. Wait for it. Wait until they're committed. Wait until they're so deep they can't easily retreat. Torres monitored the enemy positions. They're passing marker 7. Still advancing. They're not scanning actively. They think the debris is just debris. Arrogance. It's killed more armies than any weapon. Volkov waited until the enemy fleet was exactly where he wanted them. All units execute Protocol Hornet's Nest. Wake up the swarm. Throughout the asteroid belt, the drones activated. Their engines fired, and they launched toward the Krynoth fleet like a wave of mechanical fury. 28,000 missiles, each seeking a target, each carrying enough explosive to cripple a warship. Thulgrim saw them on sensors a split second before they hit. Evasive action. All ships, emergency shields. Where did they come from? There was no time for answers. The drones swarmed the Krynoth fleet like angry hornets, hence the protocol's name. They targeted engine sections, shield generators, weapon systems. Individually, they weren't much of a threat. A single drone could be shot down easily. But there weren't just a few drones. There were thousands coming from every direction at once. Explosions rippled through the Krynoth formations. Ships broke apart or went tumbling out of control. Shields designed to stop capital ship weapons struggled against the sheer number of impacts. It was death by 1,000 cuts, and the Krynoth had never experienced anything like it. Damage report. Thulgrim roared as his flagship shuddered under multiple impacts. 17 ships destroyed, War Commander. 43 more with critical damage. Shields are failing across the fleet. These weapons are primitive but effective in such numbers. We are taking heavy casualties. Return fire. Destroy those drones. But shooting the drones was like trying to swat flies with a battleship. The Krynoth weapons were designed for large targets, not small, fast-moving objects. For every drone they destroyed, 5 more got through. The perfect formations dissolved into chaos as ships tried to avoid the swarm. That's when the human fleet struck. Volkov's ships had been waiting in the outer system, hidden behind moons and planets. Now they jumped in, appearing at close range to the confused Krynoth forces. All ships target their command vessels. Take out their leadership and the rest will fall apart. Fire at will. The human ships didn't target randomly. They had studied Krynoth tactics during the previous battle. They knew which ships were command vessels, which carried their leadership, which were critical to fleet coordination. Human missiles and railgun fire focused on those targets with surgical precision. The Krynoth fleet tried to respond, but they were fighting 2 battles at once. The drones continued their relentless assault from one direction, while human warships hammered them from another. Their formations, designed for organized warfare, became a liability in the chaos. Jackson led his Marines in a desperate gambit. Boarding teams, target that carrier. If we can take it, we can use their own fighters against them. His transport screamed toward the Krynoth carrier through a storm of weapons fire. Half his team died before they even reached the target. Jackson didn't slow down. The transport slammed into the carrier's hull, and the Marines poured out, weapons blazing. The Krynoth crew fought hard, but Jackson's team fought harder. They used every dirty trick humanity had learned in 10,000 years of warfare. They used explosives to create choke points. They used the ship's own systems against the crew, venting atmosphere in some sections while overpressurizing others. They fought with a brutality that shocked the Krynoth, who thought they understood violence. Contact Section 9, one of Jackson's Marines called out. Heavy resistance. We're pinned down. Jackson grabbed a plasma cutter meant for ship repairs and modified it on the spot into a weapon. Then we go through them. No retreat. No surrender. Just forward. They carved through bulkheads, ignoring the proper corridors entirely. The Krynoth defenders found themselves attacked from directions they hadn't thought possible. Within 20 minutes, Jackson's team reached the carrier's bridge. Within 25 minutes, the carrier was theirs. All human ships, this is Jackson. We've captured the carrier Bloodfang. Her fighter bays are intact and full. Permission to launch against our enemies using their own birds? Volkov smiled grimly. Permission granted. Show them the price of picking a fight with humans. Krynoth fighters, now piloted by human volunteers who had spent the last 2 days learning the controls, launched from the captured carrier. They joined the battle, attacking Krynoth ships that didn't realize they were now enemy combatants until it was too late. The confusion added another layer to the chaos. Thulgrim watched his perfect battle plan collapse into disaster. This is impossible. They are outnumbered. They are outgunned. How are we losing? His second officer, Vokrin, understood even if Thulgrim did not. They do not fight like civilized species, War Commander. They use tactics we consider dishonorable. They sacrifice their own units freely. They exploit every weakness. They turn our own weapons against us. They fight like animals cornered on their death world. Then we will respond with overwhelming force. All ships target the human flagship. I want Captain Volkov dead. Once their leader falls, they will break. Every Krynoth ship in range turned their weapons on the Relentless. The firepower was staggering. Nothing could survive that much concentrated destruction. The human dreadnought's shields failed within seconds. Armor boiled away. Hull breaches appeared across every deck. "Captain, we're taking critical damage," Torres reported. "Hull integrity at 30%. We've lost weapons, shields, and main engines. Life support is failing. Sir, we need to evacuate." Volkov looked at his dying ship, at his crew, still at their stations despite certain death approaching, at the battle raging outside where humans were winning despite impossible odds. He thought about Earth, about humanity's long history of last stands and hopeless battles. Sometimes one person's sacrifice could change everything. Negative. "All crew, this is the captain. Abandon ship." "That's an order." "Everyone to the escape pods, move." "Sir, what about you?" Torres asked. "Someone needs to steer. Someone needs to make sure this ship does one last thing for humanity. Now go." "That's an order, Lieutenant." Torres hesitated, then saluted. "It's been an honor, sir." The crew evacuated, flooding into escape pods that launched toward friendly ships. Within minutes, Volkov was alone on the bridge of the dying Relentless. He sat in his captain's chair and looked at the tactical display. The Krynoth flagship, the Eternal Dominion, sat at the center of their fleet. It was massive, powerful, and protected by layers of shields that had survived everything humanity had thrown at it. But those shields were designed to stop weapons fire, not a 3-million-ton starship traveling at maximum velocity. Volkov diverted every remaining bit of power to the engines. The Relentless groaned and shuddered, but it began to move. Faster, faster, heading directly toward the Eternal Dominion. Thulgrim saw the dying ship accelerating toward him. What is he doing? That ship is crippled. It poses no threat, Vakrin understood. His eyes went wide. War Commander, he is going to ram us. He is using his ship as a weapon. Impossible. No commander would sacrifice his own vessel and life in such a manner. You still do not understand humans, War Commander. They will do anything to win. Even die. Thulgrim tried to maneuver, but the Eternal Dominion was too large, too slow. The Relentless, engine screaming, armor burning, crashed into the Krynoth flagship like the fist of an angry god. The impact was catastrophic. The Relentless broke apart on contact, but its momentum carried debris through the Eternal Dominion shields. Metal tore through metal. Reactors overloaded. The massive dreadnought shuddered, listed, and then broke in half. Secondary explosions rippled through both halves as they drifted apart. War Commander Thulgrim died in those explosions along with his entire command staff. The Krynoth fleet sutta 3 weeks after the battle in Velen space. A combined fleet of human and Velen warships emerged at the edge of the Krynoth Prime system. It was smaller than the force that had defended the Velen homeworld, just 200 ships. But these were veterans now, crews who had seen the worst and survived. They were lean, mean, and absolutely furious. Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the Vengeance. The name was chosen deliberately. This wasn't a liberation. This wasn't a rescue. This was payback. Status report. All ships reporting ready, Admiral. The Krynoth home system has defensive platforms and a garrison fleet of approximately 800 vessels. Intelligence suggests most of their military is still scattered from our previous engagement. Good. That means we caught them unprepared. They thought we'd lick our wounds and hide. They're about to learn that humans don't hide. Kane pulled up a star map showing Krynoth Prime. Tactical, I want targets identified. Military installations only. Shipyards, weapons factories, training facilities. We're not here to harm civilians, but we're going to gut their ability to wage war. Lieutenant Torres, promoted after the Relentless went down, worked her console. Targets locked, Admiral. 3 orbital shipyards, 5 planetary defense platforms, and their main military academy on the second moon. Transmit targeting data to all ships. Weapons free on my mark. The Galactic Council had condemned the human operation before it even began. They called it aggression, revenge-driven madness, a violation of every civilized law of warfare. Their official message to Earth demanded humanity stand down immediately, or face sanctions, embargoes, and possible military intervention. Earth's response had been brief and pointed. You stood by and watched genocide. You did nothing while innocents died. You have no moral authority here. Stand aside. Ambassador Ilin watched the approaching battle from a Velen command ship. The elderly diplomat had changed in the past weeks. The broken, defeated being who had arrived at human space begging for help was gone. In its place stood something harder, tempered by war and loss.
Admiral Kane, the Krynoth are broadcasting on all frequencies.
They demand we withdraw immediately. Let them demand.
Open a channel.
The view screen showed Vakrin, the Krynoth commander who had survived the previous battle. He looked tired and surprisingly not entirely hostile. Admiral Kane of Earth, I warned my superiors about your species. They did not listen. Now you are here at our homeworld, with weapons aimed at our people. What are your demands? Kane's expression was carved from ice. Demand no, Commander. This isn't a negotiation. Let me tell you what's going to happen. Your military will surrender completely. Every warship, every weapon, every soldier. You will hand over your leaders for trial. You will pay reparations to every species you've enslaved or destroyed. You will dismantle your empire piece by piece. And if you refuse any of this, we will do it for you. Vakrin's face showed something like respect. You cannot occupy our entire empire. You do not have the numbers, watch us. We don't need to occupy everything. We just need to make it so expensive for you to rebuild that you'll never threaten anyone again. We've studied your economy, your logistics, your whole system. We know how to break it. So you have two choices. Surrender now, or we turn your civilization back 1,000 years. Your call. And what guarantee do we have that you will not simply exterminate us? You are, after all, Deathworlders. Violence is your nature. Kane's smile was cold. Violence is a tool, Commander. We use it when necessary. But unlike you, we don't enjoy it. We're not here to commit genocide. We're here to ensure you never commit it again. There's a difference. Jackson led his Marines toward the orbital shipyard designated Target Alpha. His team had been reinforced with Velen volunteers, including Torin, who had proven himself a capable warrior during training and battle. They approached in stealth pods, running dark to avoid detection. Remember the plan, Jackson whispered into the comm. We take the control center, shut down the yard's defenses, and hold it until the main fleet can disable it permanently. Non-lethal force when possible. These are workers, not soldiers. But if they shoot first, you shoot back. Clear? Clear, sir. Torin's voice was steady. The young Velen had come a long way from the terrified volunteer he'd been weeks ago. They breached the hull and moved through the shipyard like ghosts. Most of the workers fled at first sight of the armed troops. A few Krynoth security forces tried to resist and were put down quickly. Within 30 minutes, Jackson's team held the control center. Admiral, Target Alpha is secure. Defense grid is down. You're clear to move in. Acknowledged. Good work, Lieutenant. The human fleet advanced on the Krynoth defensive positions. The garrison fleet tried to mount a defense, but they were badly outnumbered and facing veterans who had already beaten a force 3 times their size. The battle was short and brutal. Within 2 hours, the Krynoth orbital defenses were destroyed or captured. Kane opened a channel to the planet below. Krynoth Prime, this is Admiral Rebecca Kane of the Terran Defense Fleet. Your orbital defenses are gone. Your fleet is destroyed. You have 1 hour to surrender your government and military leadership, or we begin orbital strikes on military targets. I say again, military targets only. We will not harm civilians, but your ability to wage war ends today. On the planet's surface in the Grand Dominion Palace, the Krynoth High Council convened an emergency session. The Supreme Archon, a massive Krynoth who had ruled for 30 years, slammed his claws against the table. This is outrageous. We are the Dominion. We have conquered 100 worlds. We will not bow to a primitive species from a backwater planet. The Minister of War, a scarred veteran, disagreed. Archon, we have no choice. Our fleet is broken. Our defenses are gone. These humans fight in ways we cannot counter. They turn every weakness into a weapon. They sacrifice themselves without hesitation. And they are not bluffing about the orbital strikes. If we do not surrender, they will cripple us, and then we fight to the last. We die with honor rather than submit to inferior beings. With respect, Archon, there is no honor in pointless death. And these humans are not inferior. They are different. They are Deathworlders. We made a fatal mistake in threatening them. Now we pay the price. The debate raged for 45 minutes. Then Admiral Kane made good on her promise. A single orbital strike destroyed the Krynoth Military Academy on the second moon. It was a surgical strike with no civilian casualties, but the message was clear. Comply or more would follow. The High Council surrendered. Kane stood in the ruins of the council chamber 3 days later. The Krynoth leadership had been arrested and were awaiting trial. Occupation forces, a mix of human and Velen troops, secured key facilities. The Dominion's military was in the process of complete disarmament. Commander Vakrin approached her, now wearing civilian clothes. He had been stripped of rank and authority. "Admiral, I'm told you wish to speak with me." "I do. You're the closest thing the Krynoth have to a reasonable leader right now. Your people are angry. They feel humiliated. Some are calling for resistance, guerrilla warfare. I need you to talk them down." "Why would I do that?" "You have destroyed everything we built over centuries. Because the alternative is worse." Kane pulled up images on a holographic display. "This is what total war looks like. This is what happens when you push a Death World species too far. We can turn your entire civilization into ash. We have the weapons. We have the will. But we don't want to. We're not monsters, Commander. We're just very, very good at stopping monsters." Vokrin studied the images of human weapons, human tactics, human history. "What do you want from us?" "I want you to understand something. The galaxy has operated under the same rules for thousands of years. The strong dominate the weak. Might makes right. Slavery and conquest are accepted as normal. Well, Earth doesn't accept that. We're here to change the rules, and we're willing to fight every empire, every dominion, every species that profits from suffering until those rules change. You cannot police the entire galaxy. Maybe not, but we can make examples. The Krynoth Dominion will be the first. You will be completely disarmed. You will pay reparations. You will return every slave, every prisoner, every conquered population, and you will do it under human and Velen supervision for the next 50 years. If you resist, we'll extend it to 100. If you attack anyone again, we'll end you as a civilization. Permanently." Vokrin was silent for a long moment. "You truly mean this? Every word? Because here's what you need to understand about humans, Commander. We remember. We remember every wrong done to us or those we protect, and we will cross light years and fight for decades to make things right. Your people picked a fight with the one species in the galaxy that never, ever gives up. Now you live with the consequences." Ambassador Ilin addressed the Galactic Council from the Great Assembly Hall on the neutral world of Harmony Station. The council chamber held representatives from 200 species, many of whom had protested humanity's actions. Ilin stood before them all, forearms spread wide. "Honored council members, you condemn Earth for violating the laws of civilized warfare. You call humans aggressive, violent, dangerous, and you are correct. Humans are a..." Dr. Kaya Thorne was drinking her morning coffee when the universe changed forever. She sat in the observation deck of the Vellani research station, watching the swirling clouds of the gas giant below. The station was quiet at this hour, with most of the crew still sleeping. Kaya liked these peaceful moments before the day began. The communication array suddenly came alive with urgent beeping. Kaya rushed to the control panel, her coffee forgotten. The signals were weak and broken, coming from somewhere far beyond their solar system. She adjusted the receivers and tried to clean up the transmission. What she heard made her blood turn cold. The voice was deep and growling, speaking in the ancient Korthak language. Kaya had studied their tongue for years, fascinated by the warrior culture that had dominated the Outer Rim for 3,000 years. The Korthak never showed weakness. They never asked for help. They would rather die than admit defeat. But now they were screaming. "Ancient enemy has awakened," the voice said through static and interference. "Our fleets burn in the void. Our worlds go silent one by one. To anyone who receives this message, we are dying. The old darkness has returned and we cannot stop it." The transmission cut to silence. Kaya played it again, then again. Her hands shook as she transcribed every word. The Korthak Empire controlled 47 star systems. Their battle fleets were the strongest in known space. If something could make them beg for help, it threatened everything. She sent the recording to Earth Command immediately. 3 hours later, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in the orbital station above Centauri Prime. The chamber buzzed with nervous energy as the recording played for all to hear. "This could be a trick," said Ambassador Rylus of the Zentari Federation. His blue skin had turned pale with worry. "The Korthak are proud. They would never send such a message unless they were truly desperate. Or unless they want us to walk into a trap," replied High Counselor Vex from the Altanian Collective. Her 6 arms gestured wildly as she spoke. "We know nothing about this supposed ancient enemy." The debate went on for hours while more reports came in. Korthak border worlds had stopped responding to hails. Trade ships reported finding empty space where colonies used to be. Something was sweeping through Korthak territory like a plague, leaving nothing behind. On Earth, Admiral Harrison Webb stood in the war room beneath Geneva. The massive screens showed star charts of Korthak space, with red X marks appearing over dead systems. His staff officers looked grim as they studied the tactical situation. "How many ships can we deploy?" Webb asked his aide. "The third battle group is closest," Captain Marcus Reed replied. He was a tall man with gray hair and scars from the Proxima Wars. 12 heavy cruisers and support vessels. "We could reach Korthak space in 4 days." Webb nodded slowly. The third battle group had a reputation among alien species. They called it the Death Worlder Fleet, commanded by the humans who refused to die. Other species feared them almost as much as they respected them. "Give Reed full authorization," Webb decided, "and tell him to prepare for anything." Captain Reed received his orders aboard the flagship Prometheus. The massive vessel hummed with activity as the crew prepared for emergency deployment. Reed walked through the corridors checking on his people. They were all volunteers, the best soldiers humanity had to offer. In the weapons bay, Chief Gunner Tom Bradley was calibrating the plasma cannons. The big man looked up as Reed approached. "Are we really going to help the Korthak, sir?" Bradley asked. "They've been enemies of Earth for decades." "They're in trouble," Reed replied simply. "When someone sends a distress call, we answer. That's what humans do." Commander Elena Vasquez joined them, her tactical tablet in hand. She was Reed's second in command. Known for her quick thinking in battle, intel suggests whatever hit the Korthak is moving fast. "We might be walking into a graveyard." Reed studied the star charts on her tablet. The progression of dead worlds showed a clear pattern, moving toward the heart of Korthak territory. In another day it would reach their home world. "Then we better move faster," he said. The human fleet departed Earth space within 6 hours. 12 warships accelerated toward the jump points, their engines burning bright against the stars. Other species took weeks to mobilize their forces. Humans could be ready for war in hours. As they traveled through hyperspace, Reed gathered his senior officers in the briefing room. The holographic display showed what little they knew about the threat. "Whatever we're facing, it's not like anything in our databases," Intelligence Officer Lisa Park reported. She was young but brilliant, recruited from the Academy's top class. The Korthak descriptions mention something called the Old Darkness and the Ancient Enemy. Their oldest records speak of a great war fought millions of years ago. Millions? Reed frowned.
"What could survive that long?"
"Unknown, sir. But if the Korthak are this terrified, we should be prepared for anything." Navigation Officer David Cross pulled up the route to Korthak space. "We'll exit hyperspace at the edge of their territory. From there, it's a 3-hour burn to their homeworld." Reed nodded. "Weapons Officer, what's our combat status?" Lieutenant Jake Morrison consulted his reports. "All systems green, sir. Nuclear missiles armed, plasma batteries charged, point defense systems online. We're ready for a fight." "Good, because I have a feeling we're going to get one." The next 3 days passed in tense preparation. The crew ran combat drills and studied what little intelligence they had about Korthak military tactics. Everyone knew this mission was different. For the first time in decades, humanity was responding to a call for help instead of fighting for survival. Dr. Emma Walsh, the fleet's science officer, spent her time analyzing the fragmentary data from Korthak space. She was a specialist in terraforming and planetary geology, but her knowledge of ancient civilizations might prove useful. "Captain," she called Reed to her laboratory, "I've been studying the historical references to this ancient enemy. The Korthak legends speak of something that consumes entire worlds, leaving them empty and lifeless. They called it the Convergence. Convergence of what? Unknown. But according to the myths, it was defeated by an alliance of species working together. The Korthak were part of that alliance, which might explain why they're the first target." Reed felt a chill run down his spine. "You think this thing holds grudges?" "If it's real and if it's as old as the legends suggest, then yes. It might be seeking revenge on the descendants of those who fought it before." The fleet continued its journey through the dark between stars. On the 4th day, they reached the edge of Korthak space. What they found there would haunt them forever. The border station was gone. Not destroyed, not damaged, simply gone. In its place was empty space and scattered debris that didn't match any known technology. The debris glowed with a strange crystalline light that hurt to look at directly. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Morrison from his weapons station. "What could do this?" Reed stared at the tactical display. According to the charts, there should have been a massive defense platform here. capable of holding off entire fleets. Now there was nothing but cosmic dust in those strange glowing fragments. Set course for the Korthak homeworld, he ordered. Maximum burn, and prepare for the worst. The human fleet raced deeper into Korthak territory, leaving the safety of known space behind. Whatever they were about to face, Reed knew it would test everything they believed about war, survival, and the price of being the galaxy's most dangerous deathworlders. The Korthak homeworld hung in space like a dying ember. Captain Reed stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, staring at the main screen in disbelief. The planet that should have been covered in the lights of 1 billion warriors was dark and silent, but it was the space around the planet that truly horrified him, Korthak. Warships drifted everywhere like the bones of some ancient graveyard. Massive dreadnoughts that could level cities floated dead in the void. Their hulls were covered in strange crystalline growths that pulsed with sickly light. Some of the crystals were larger than buildings, spreading across the ships like cancer. How many vessels? Reed asked quietly. Over 300 confirmed, Navigation Officer Cross reported, his voice shaking. The entire Korthak home fleet. All dead. Commander Vasquez studied the sensor readings on her tablet. I'm detecting some life signs, but they're scattered and weak. Most of the ships show no crew at all. Reed made his decision quickly. Prepare boarding shuttles. I want teams on the flagship and 2 of the larger vessels. Full combat gear and isolation suits. Sir, Dr. Walsh interrupted from her science station. Those crystalline formations are giving off massive energy readings. They might be dangerous to approach. Everything about this is dangerous, Reed replied. But we need to know what we're fighting. 30 minutes later, Commander Vasquez led the first boarding party toward the Korthak flagship Tokmar. The massive vessel was over 2 kilometers long, built for war and intimidation. Now it drifted silent and cold, its weapon ports dark. Marine Sergeant Lisa Kane checked her rifle as their shuttle approached the docking bay. She was a veteran of the Titan Rebellion, known for keeping her team alive in impossible situations. Behind her, 8 more Marines prepared their equipment. Remember, Vasquez said over the comm, we don't know what killed the crew. Stay together, watch each other's backs, and report anything unusual immediately. The shuttle landed in the Tokmar's main bay without resistance. The Marines moved out in formation, their weapons ready. Emergency lighting cast everything in red shadows, and their boots echoed in the empty space. The first bodies they found made Kane curse in 3 languages. Korthak warriors were 8 feet tall and built like living tanks. Their thick hide could stop small arms fire, and their natural weapons could tear through steel. These warriors had died in terror, their faces frozen in expressions of absolute horror. But worse than their deaths were the changes. Crystal growths sprouted from the bodies like flowers from corpses. The formations were beautiful and terrible, catching the light and splitting it into rainbow colors. Some crystals had grown through the warriors' skulls while others emerged from their chests or limbs. "What the hell is this?" whispered Private Murphy, the youngest member of the team. Dr. Walsh's voice crackled through their comm units. "Commander, I'm reading massive biological activity from those crystal formations. They're not just growing on the bodies, they're integrated with them." Vasquez knelt beside one of the fallen warriors. Her scanner beeped rapidly as it analyzed the crystal structure. "These readings don't make sense. The crystals show both organic and inorganic properties. It's like they're alive but made of living metal." The team moved deeper into the ship, finding more bodies at every turn. Some areas were completely overrun with crystal growth, the walls and ceiling covered in the glowing formations. The air recycling systems had failed, filled with the same crystalline material. In the ship's command center, they found something that made them all stop in shock. Admiral Jorek, the legendary Korthak fleet commander, was still alive. The massive warrior was trapped in his command chair, crystal growths holding him in place like chains. But his eyes were alert, and he turned his head as the humans approached. Half of his face was covered in crystal, but he could still speak. "Humans," he growled in broken English. "You came." Vasquez approached carefully, her medical scanner running. "Admiral, what happened here?" "What did this to your fleet?" Jorek's remaining eye fixed on her with desperate intensity. "We woke it. The old enemy. We thought the legends were stories to frighten children. We were wrong." "What enemy? What are you talking about?" 3 months ago, our mining operation on Cathera found something. Deep underground, in caves older than our civilization, a structure made of the same crystal you see here. Our scientists thought it was just mineral formations. Kane kept watch at the entrance while the Admiral continued his story. The marine sensors were picking up movement in other parts of the ship, but nothing was approaching yet. When they touched it, the structure came alive, Jorek said. It sent signals into space, calling something home. Within days, our outer colonies went silent. Then the fleets came. What fleets? Vasquez demanded. Ships like nothing we had ever seen, made of living crystal, commanded by minds that thought as one. They did not destroy us quickly. They converted us, made us into part of their collective. Dr. Walsh's voice interrupted through the comm. Commander, I'm detecting massive movement in the gas giant's rings. Something big is coming your way. Vasquez looked at her scanner. The crystalline growths on the Admiral were spreading even as they talked. Soon he would be completely consumed. How do we fight them? She asked urgently. Jorek's voice was growing weaker. You cannot fight the convergence with weapons. It learns from everything it consumes. It knows our tactics, our strategies, our fears. It adapts to every attack. There has to be a way. Your ancestors defeated it before. Different time, different alliance. The convergence was smaller then, weaker. Now it has consumed 1,000 worlds across the galaxy. It has grown strong on the knowledge of the dead. The ship suddenly shuddered around them. Kane looked up from her position. Commander, we need to go, now. Vasquez grabbed Jorek's armored hand. Is there anything that can hurt it? Any weakness at all? The Admiral's eye was dimming as the crystals spread across his skull. Chaos, he whispered. It thinks in patterns and order. Chaos confuses it, but you would need minds unlike any other species. Minds that can think the unthinkable. The ship shook again, harder this time. Through the viewports they could see massive shapes moving among the dead fleet. Ships that gleamed like jewels and moved with impossible grace. The boarding party to extraction point. Reed's voice barked through their comms. All teams return immediately. As they ran through the corridors, Vasquez looked back once at Admiral Jorek. The crystal had covered his face completely, but she could swear she saw his eye watching them go. A warrior's final act of defiance against the thing that had consumed his people. The shuttle bay was in chaos when they arrived. Crystal formations were sprouting from the walls and floor, growing visibly as they watched. The shuttle pilot had the engines running and ready for immediate departure. As they lifted off from the Thokmar, Kane looked out the window at the approaching ships. They were beautiful and terrifying, like living sculptures of light and crystal. Some were as large as cities, others small and swift like metal birds. Captain, Vasquez reported as their shuttle raced back to the Prometheus. The Korthak are gone. Whatever hit them, it doesn't just kill. It converts everything into part of itself, and now it knows we're here. Reed's voice was grim on the comm. Then we better be ready for a fight unlike anything we've ever faced. Behind them, the Convergence fleet emerged from the gas giant's rings like a swarm of crystal angels. Their hulls reflected the light of the dying sun, turning space itself into a kaleidoscope of deadly beauty. The real war was about to begin. The first battle was a massacre. Captain Reed watched in horror as the frigate Defiant died screaming. The Convergence ship that killed it was half the size but moved like a living thing. When the Defiant's plasma cannons hit its hull, the crystalline armor simply absorbed the energy and grew stronger. Then the enemy ship touched the Defiant with what looked like metallic tentacles. In seconds, crystal growth spread across the human vessel like infection. Through the comm channels, Reed could hear Lieutenant Morrison and his crew crying out as their bodies changed into something else. All ships, evasive maneuvers, Reed shouted into his comm. Do not let them touch you. But the Convergence ships moved too fast. They flowed through space like schools of fish, coordinating their attacks with perfect precision. Every time the human fleet adapted to their tactics, the enemy adapted faster. The cruiser Yorktown tried to ram one of the smaller crystal ships. The impact should have shattered both vessels. Instead, the Convergence ship absorbed the Yorktown on contact, adding its mass and crew to the growing swarm. In the weapon control room of the Prometheus, Chief Gunner Bradley cursed as his plasma bolts bounced harmlessly off enemy hulls. These things learn too damn fast. Every shot we take, they get more resistant. Commander Vasquez studied the tactical display with growing desperation. They had started the battle with 12 ships. Now they were down to 8, and the Convergence fleet kept growing stronger with each vessel they consumed. Captain, she called to Reed, conventional weapons aren't working. We need a new approach. Reed's mind raced as he watched another human ship fall to the crystal swarm. The enemy fought with perfect coordination, like a single organism with many bodies. Their movements were mathematical, precise, predictable. Admiral Jorik's last words echoed in his memory. Chaos confuses it. You would need minds unlike any other species. Reed grabbed the ship's comm and opened a channel to all remaining vessels. All ships, this is the captain. I want you to forget everything you know about space combat. No formations, no tactics, no strategy. Just fight, sir? Lieutenant Cross looked confused from his navigation station. You heard me. Random attacks, crazy maneuvers, whatever comes into your head. Make it impossible for them to predict what we'll do next. Chief Engineer Ana Rodriguez was listening from the engine room. A brilliant woman who had redesigned half the ship's systems during her spare time, she understood immediately. Captain, request permission to try something completely insane. Granted. What do you have in mind? We've got mining charges in Cargo Bay 3. I can rig them with proximity fuses and launch them like missiles. It won't be precise, but it'll be chaos. Dr. Walsh looked up from her science station. I can help with that. I've been analyzing their movement patterns. They expect logical behavior. If we start acting irrationally, it might confuse their collective intelligence. Reed grinned fiercely. Do it, all ships, prepare for random chaos. Let's show these crystal bugs how humans really fight. The battle changed in an instant. The destroyer, Ranger, suddenly broke formation and started spinning like a top while firing its weapons in random directions. Most shots missed, but some hit the convergence ships from unexpected angles. The enemy formation wavered as they tried to process this bizarre behavior. Rodriguez launched her improvised mining charges in wild patterns. Some exploded harmlessly in space, but others caught the crystal ships off guard. The explosions didn't damage them much, but they disrupted their perfect coordination. Sergeant Kane, now commanding the Marine detachment, had her own idea. Sir, request permission to broadcast something over all channels. What kind of something? Human music. The loudest, craziest stuff we have. If these things are telepathic, maybe it'll give them a headache. Within minutes, death metal and punk rock were screaming across every communication frequency. The chaotic noise seemed to affect the convergent ships, making their movements less smooth and coordinated. Dr. Walsh was inspired by Kane's idea. She accessed the ship's cultural database and started broadcasting random human memories and experiences. Horror movies, comedy shows, war documentaries, children's cartoons, everything streaming at once in a massive data dump. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The convergent ships began making mistakes. They collided with each other, fired at empty space, and moved in stuttering, confused patterns. The perfect coordination that made them so deadly was breaking down under the assault of pure human chaos. It's working, Vasquez shouted from her station. Their formation is falling apart. Reed saw his chance. All ships ramming speed. Nuclear self-destruct on impact. Let's take as many of these things with us as we can. What followed was the most insane naval battle in human history. The cruiser Valiant accelerated directly into the largest convergence ship, her captain screaming war songs over the comm. The nuclear explosion that followed vaporized both vessels and damaged 3 more enemy ships. The corvette Swift Dance started playing chicken with crystal fighters, dodging at the last second and letting them crash into asteroids. When one enemy ship tried to predict the maneuver, it flew straight into a minefield that Rodriguez had scattered. Chief Bradley discovered that the crystal ships had trouble processing multiple simultaneous attacks from impossible angles. He started firing the Prometheus's weapons in random sequences while Lieutenant Morrison spun the ship like a drunken dancer. The chaos reached its peak when Dr. Walsh made her most brilliant discovery, Captain, she called excitedly. I've been monitoring their communication frequencies. They're trying to process everything we're throwing at them. But human consciousness is too random for their collective mind. We're overloading their systems. How do we use that? Give me access to all communication arrays. I want to broadcast the most chaotic human thoughts we can generate. Stream of consciousness, random memories, everything. Reed nodded. Do it. All crew members start thinking out loud. Talk about anything and everything. The weirder the better. Soon the airwaves were filled with human voices talking about their dreams, their fears, their random thoughts and memories. Stories about childhood pets mixed with technical discussions about engine repair. Love letters merged with grocery lists and half-remembered song lyrics. The Convergence fleet began to retreat. For the first time in the battle, the crystal ships pulled back from the humans. Their movements became erratic and desperate as they tried to escape the overwhelming chaos of human consciousness. But Reed wasn't about to let them go. All remaining ships pursue and harass. Keep broadcasting the chaos. Don't let them think clearly enough to adapt. The human fleet, now down to 5 ships, chased the retreating convergence vessels toward the edge of the system. They kept up their random attacks and chaotic broadcasts, driving the crystal ships before them like a pack of wolves hunting deer. Finally, at the system's edge, the last convergence ships vanished into hyperspace. The battlefield fell silent except for the continued babble of human voices over the comm channels. Reed slumped in his command chair, exhausted but victorious. Around him, his crew slowly stopped their chaotic chatter and returned to normal operations. The ship felt strangely quiet after the madness of battle. "Damage report," he called out. 7 ships lost, Vasquez reported grimly. "But we drove them off. They're gone." Dr. Walsh was still analyzing the battle data. "Captain, I don't think this is over. What we fought was just a scouting force. The way they retreated suggests they were gathering information about us." "What kind of information?" "How we fight, how we think. They may have lost this battle, but they learned something about humanity. Next time, they'll be prepared for our chaos." Reed looked out at the debris field where 7 human ships had made their final stand. Good people had died here, but they had proven something important. Humans could fight the convergence and win. The question was, what would happen when the enemy learned to be just as chaotic as they were? Navigation Officer Cross interrupted his thoughts. "Sir, I'm receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. They want a full report on the engagement." Reed stood up slowly. "Tell them we won the battle. But warn them the war is just beginning. The convergence knows about us now, and they won't be caught off guard again." As the surviving human ships began their journey home, none of them noticed the small crystal fragments that had attached themselves to their hulls during the battle, fragments that pulsed with quiet intelligence, recording everything they saw and heard. The convergence was learning, and soon it would be ready to return with new tactics designed specifically to counter the chaotic nature of human warfare. The real test was yet to come. 6 months after the first battle, the convergence returned with a vengeance. Admiral Thomas Blackwood stood in the command center beneath Geneva, watching the tactical displays with growing alarm. Red markers appeared across the galaxy as world after world went silent. But this time, the enemy wasn't just consuming random targets. They were moving with purpose, striking specific locations. "They're learning our supply routes," reported Intelligence Director Sarah Kim. "Every target they hit cuts off resources to human colonies. They're trying to starve us out." Captain Reed, promoted after his victory at Korthak Space, studied the enemy movements on the holographic display. His hair had gone completely gray in the last 6 months, and new scars covered his hands where crystal fragments had tried to convert him during the boarding actions. "It's worse than that," he said quietly. "Look at the pattern. They're not just cutting supply lines. They're herding us." Admiral Blackwood frowned. "Herding us toward what?" "The Sol system. They want us to make our last stand here, at Earth, where they can study us up close." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The convergence hadn't been defeated at Korthak Space. They had been collecting data, learning how humans fought and thought. Now they were coming to finish what they started. "How long do we have?" Blackwood asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3, Reed replied. "They're moving faster than before. The ships we detected are larger and more advanced than anything we faced previously." Blackwood made his decision. "Activate Project Lazarus. Full authorization." Reed felt his blood turn cold. Every officer in the room knew about Lazarus, but most hoped they would never have to use it. It was humanity's deepest secret, a weapon so dangerous that even mentioning it required special clearance. "Sir, are you certain?" "The risks." "The risks of not using it are worse," Blackwood interrupted. "If the convergence reaches Earth, it's over. Not just for humanity, but for every species in the galaxy." 3 days later, Reed found himself aboard the experimental vessel Infinity, flagship of humanity's most classified fleet. The ship looked nothing like conventional vessels. Its hull was smooth and black, covered in sensors and weapon systems that bent the laws of physics. Commander Jessica Stone met him at the airlock. She was the youngest fleet commander in human history, chosen specifically for her ability to think in ways that even other humans found disturbing. "Welcome to the madhouse, Captain," she said with a grim smile. "Hope you're ready for a physics lesson." Stone led him through the ship's corridors. Everything was wrong here. Gravity shifted directions randomly, corridors curved in impossible ways, and some rooms seemed larger inside than outside. The crew moved through it all with practiced ease, as if reality-bending architecture was perfectly normal. "Lazarus ships operate on different principles than regular vessels," Stone explained as they walked. "We use controlled singularities as weapons, black holes, white holes, wormholes, things that can tear apart space and time itself." They reached the bridge, which existed in a constant state of controlled chaos. Holographic displays showed star charts that folded and twisted in dimensions that hurt to look at. The crew worked at stations that phased in and out of normal space. Dr. Michael Torres, the project's chief scientist, approached them with obvious excitement. He was young and brilliant, the kind of genius who saw the impossible as merely improbable. "Captain Reed, perfect timing. We've just completed the final tests on the quantum disruption cannon. Want to see a demonstration?" Through the main view screen, Reed watched as a test asteroid simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized, but erased from reality as if it had never been there at all. "How?" he asked in amazement. "We create a localized collapse in spacetime," Torres explained happily. "The target falls into a miniature black hole that we generate and control. Very clean, very efficient, and absolutely impossible to defend against." Stone checked her tactical displays. "The Convergence fleet will reach the outer system in 10 days. Long-range sensors show over 3,000 vessels, including some that are bigger than anything we've ever seen." Reed studied the enemy formation on the holographic display. The Convergence had learned from their first encounter with humans. Instead of the chaotic swarm tactics they had used before, they were moving in precise formations designed to counter human unpredictability. "They're expecting us to fight the same way as before," he realized. "Random attacks, chaotic tactics, they've adapted their strategy to handle that." "Then we adapt too," Stone replied. "That's what the Lazarus Project is for. Weapons and tactics so advanced that even we don't fully understand them." Over the next week, the human fleet prepared for the most important battle in their history. Regular warships took positions throughout the solar system, while the Lazarus vessels remained hidden in the outer asteroid belt. Sergeant Kane, now a major, commanded the Special Forces teams aboard the reality-warping ships. Her soldiers were equipped with weapons that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and armor that could phase through solid matter. "Remember," she told her troops during the final briefing, "these ships don't follow normal physics. Your rifles fire bullets that exist in folded space. Your grenades create temporal explosions, and if you get confused, just shoot at anything. Crystalline and let the smart people worry about how it works." Chief Engineer Rodriguez had been assigned to the experimental vessel Paradox. Her job was to maintain engines that powered themselves by stealing energy from parallel universes. It was the kind of assignment that would have driven most people insane. "The beauty of impossible technology," she explained to her engineering team, "is that when it breaks, you just hit it with a bigger impossibility until it works again." Dr. Walsh remained aboard the Prometheus, now serving as Reed's science advisor. She had spent months studying the crystal fragments recovered from the first battle, trying to understand how the Convergence collective mind functioned. "I think I figured out their weakness," she reported to Reed during the final strategy meeting. "They process information through quantum entanglement. All their ships are connected by subspace communication. If we could disrupt that connection, they'd lose their coordination," Reed finished. "Like cutting the nerves in a body." "Exactly. But we'd need to generate a massive quantum interference field, something that covers the entire solar system." Stone smiled grimly. "That's what the Lazarus ships are designed for. We don't just fight with black holes and twisted space. We can rewrite the fundamental laws of physics in a localized area." The Convergence fleet arrived exactly when predicted. 3,000 crystal ships emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, their hulls gleaming like jewels against the starfield. But these weren't the same vessels humans had fought before. The new ships were larger and more complex, their crystalline structures incorporating elements clearly taken from conquered species. Reed recognized Korthak weapon designs, Zentari shield generators, and technology from a dozen other civilizations. "They're using everything they've learned," he said grimly. "This is the accumulated knowledge of every species they've destroyed." The battle began when the lead convergence vessels detected the human fleet. Instead of rushing forward in chaotic swarms, they advanced in perfect formation, their movements calculated to counter every human tactic. Regular plasma weapons bounced harmlessly off their improved hulls. Nuclear missiles were intercepted by defensive systems that predicted their exact flight paths. Even ramming attacks failed as the crystal ships simply absorbed the incoming vessels without taking damage. "Phase 1 isn't working," reported Captain Morris from the destroyer Vengeance. "They're ready for everything we're throwing at them." Reed nodded. It was time for humanity's secret weapons. "All Lazarus vessels, this is Admiral Reed. You are authorized to engage with full experimental protocols. Show them what happens when humans stop playing by the rules of reality." The Infinity materialized in the middle of the convergence formation, having traveled there through folded space. Its quantum disruption cannons fired in directions that didn't exist, hitting enemy ships from impossible angles. The paradox created a localized time loop around a cluster of crystal vessels, trapping them in an endless cycle of the same 3 seconds. The enemy ships fought desperately to escape their temporal prison, while human forces picked them off one by one. Major Kane led her special forces teams in boarding actions that defied comprehension. They phased through enemy hulls, fought in corridors that existed in multiple dimensions, and planted explosives that detonated in the past to prevent the ships from ever being built. But the convergence adapted quickly. Their collective intelligence began processing the new human tactics, learning to predict even impossible attacks. Slowly, the tide of battle began to turn against humanity. That's when Dr. Walsh made her greatest discovery. "Captain," she called excitedly from her science station, "I've found it, the quantum frequency they use for communication. If we can match it with our own systems, we can jam their entire network," Reed realized. "Torres, can the Lazarus ships generate that kind of interference?" "Not individually," the scientist replied. "But if we network all of them together and create a resonance cascade, yes, it might work." The final phase of the battle was unlike anything ever seen in the galaxy. 7 Lazarus vessels positioned themselves around the solar system and began generating a quantum interference field that rewrote the laws of physics on a massive scale. Space itself became the weapon as reality, twisted and bent to human will. The convergence ships found themselves cut off from their collective mind, each vessel suddenly alone and confused. In that moment of vulnerability, the human fleet struck with everything they had. Conventional weapons became effective again as the crystal hulls lost their adaptive properties. Ship after ship fell to human firepower, but victory came at a terrible cost. The quantum interference field was tearing apart local spacetime. Stars flickered and died only to be reborn seconds later. Planets shifted in their orbits as gravity itself became unreliable. "We're destabilizing the entire system," Torres shouted over the chaos. "If we don't shut down the field soon, the sun itself will collapse." Reed faced the hardest decision of his life. They could maintain the field and destroy the convergence fleet completely, but it would also destroy Earth and everything humanity had ever built. Or they could shut down the field and let some of the enemy escape, knowing they would return stronger than ever. "Shut it down," he ordered quietly. "We've won this battle. That has to be enough." As the quantum field collapsed, the surviving convergence ships retreated into hyperspace. Of the 3,000 vessels that had attacked, fewer than 50 escaped. But Reed knew those 50 had learned valuable lessons about humanity's true capabilities. The next time they returned, they would be ready for even humanity's impossible weapons. The war was far from over. If anything, it was just beginning. 1 year after the Battle of Sol, the galaxy burned. Admiral Reed stood before the assembled representatives of the Galactic Council, but the chamber was half empty. 12 species had gone extinct in the past 6 months. Their worlds were dark, their people absorbed into the growing convergence collective. The surviving alien leaders looked at Reed with a mixture of hope and terror. They had seen the reports from Sol System. Humanity had weapons that could bend reality itself, but they had also seen the cost. 3 human colonies had been destroyed in the process of testing those weapons. The situation is worse than we initially calculated, Reed addressed the assembly. His voice was calm, but his eyes held the weight of impossible decisions. The convergence isn't just learning our tactics anymore. It's learning to think like us. Ambassador Vex of the Altanian Collective raised one of her 6 arms. What do you mean, Admiral? Reed activated a holographic display showing recent battle footage. 2 weeks ago, the convergence attacked the Rigel colonies. Instead of their usual coordinated assault, they used chaotic, unpredictable tactics. Human tactics. They've absorbed enough of our people to understand how we think. A horrified silence filled the chamber. The convergence had always been terrifying because of its perfect order and coordination. The idea that it could now fight with human unpredictability was beyond nightmare. But surely your new weapons can still defeat them, asked High Counselor Trin of the Hegemony Worlds. We've heard stories about ships that exist outside normal space. Reed's expression grew darker. Project Lazarus has been problematic. Each time we use reality warping technology, we risk tearing apart the fabric of space itself. We've already lost 3 star systems to quantum collapse. Commander Stone joined the presentation, her appearance shocking the alien delegates. Half of her body was covered in crystalline growths, the result of extended exposure to Lazarus technology. The quantum weapons were as dangerous to their users as to their enemies. The truth is, Stone said in a voice that echoed strangely, we're running out of conventional options. Every battle teaches the convergence more about how to fight us. Soon they'll be able to predict and counter even our most chaotic strategies. In the back of the chamber, General Patricia Blake sat quietly observing. She was the head of Earth Strategic Command, responsible for humanity's darkest military secrets. When she finally spoke, her words chilled everyone present. There is another option, Blake said simply, but it would require this council to make a decision that goes against everything your civilizations believe in. Ambassador Rylos leaned forward nervously. What kind of decision? Blake stood and activated her own holographic display. It showed star charts of human space, but with modifications that made no sense to the alien observers. For the past year, we've been developing what we call the Death World Protocol. The idea is simple. Instead of fighting the convergence with conventional tactics, we remake ourselves into something even more dangerous than they are. The aliens stared at the display in growing horror. The modifications showed human colonies being transformed into weapons factories, planets restructured to produce materials that shouldn't exist, space itself being redesigned to serve human military needs. You're talking about militarizing entire star systems, Ambassador Vex whispered. We're talking about survival, Blake replied coldly. The convergence consumes civilizations by adapting to their methods of warfare, so we're creating methods of warfare that are impossible to adapt to. Reed took over the explanation. Dr. Walsh and her team have been studying captured convergence technology. They've found something interesting. The collective mind has limits. There are types of thinking that it simply cannot process. Dr. Walsh appeared via hologram from her laboratory on Earth. Her appearance had changed dramatically over the past year. Extended exposure to crystalline technology had given her eyes an unnatural glow, and her voice carried harmonic overtones that suggested her consciousness existed partially outside normal space. The convergence operates on principles of logic and efficiency, she explained. It can adapt to any rational strategy no matter how complex. But there are forms of human thinking that are fundamentally irrational. Quantum consciousness, parallel processing, deliberately contradictory logic patterns. What are you suggesting? High Counselor Trin asked, though his voice suggested he didn't want to know the answer. We're suggesting that humanity undergo voluntary evolution, Blake said. Using a combination of convergence biotechnology and our own quantum research, we can transform human consciousness itself. Make ourselves think in ways that the collective mind cannot comprehend or predict. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. The alien delegates had witnessed human warfare and found it terrifying enough. The idea that humanity wanted to become even more dangerous was beyond their comprehension. Ambassador Rilo struggled to find words. You're talking about changing your entire species. The risks are acceptable, Reed finished. Because the alternative is extinction. not just for humanity, but for every thinking being in the galaxy. Blake activated another display showing the current rate of convergence expansion. At their current pace, they'll reach the galactic core within 5 years. Every major civilization will be consumed, unless we stop them here and now. Major Kane appeared at the back of the chamber escorting a group of volunteers from the Deathworld Protocol. The humans looked ordinary at first glance, but there was something subtly wrong about them. They moved too smoothly, their eyes tracked motion that wasn't there, and they spoke in perfect unison despite being individuals. Phase 1 test subjects, Kane reported. Volunteers who underwent partial transformation 6 months ago. They've been fighting the convergence with remarkable success. One of the transformed humans stepped forward. When he spoke, his voice contained harmonics that made the alien delegates physically uncomfortable. "We retain our humanity," he said, "but we think in quantum superposition. We can hold contradictory ideas simultaneously, make decisions that violate causality, and fight in ways that exist outside normal logic. The results speak for themselves," Reed added. "These volunteers have won 17 consecutive engagements against convergence forces. The enemy simply cannot predict or counter their actions." General Blake moved to the center of the chamber. "The Galactic Council has a choice. You can allow humanity to proceed with full-scale transformation, or you can face the convergence with conventional methods and watch your civilizations die one by one." The alien delegates looked at each other with growing desperation. They had come here seeking humanity's help against an impossible enemy, but the cure being offered might be worse than the disease. "If we agree to this," Ambassador Vex asked quietly, "what guarantee do we have that transformed humanity won't become as much of a threat as the convergence?" Reed's expression was grim but honest. "You don't. We're asking you to trust that our humanity will survive the transformation, that we'll remain allies instead of becoming your new oppressors. And if you're wrong, then you'll face the same choice our species faces now: adapt or die." The vote was closer than anyone expected. 17 species voted in favor of the Deathworld Protocol. 16 voted against. The decision came down to a single delegate, Ambassador Keth of the Wanderer Fleet, whose people had been refugees for centuries. "My people know what it means to lose everything," Keth said finally. "We vote in favor of humanity's transformation. May the universe forgive us all." 6 months later, the transformation began in earnest. Human colonies throughout the galaxy became centers of impossible science. Volunteers underwent procedures that rewrote their neural pathways, allowing them to think in quantum superposition and process information across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The volunteers retained their memories and personalities, but their thought patterns became increasingly alien. They could hold conversations with themselves across parallel timelines, make strategic decisions that violated cause and effect, and fight battles in conceptual space as well as physical reality. Captain Reed, now Admiral of the Deathworld Fleet, underwent the transformation himself. When he looked in the mirror afterward, his reflection sometimes showed different versions of himself from alternate realities. All of them were human, but human in ways that had never existed before. The final confrontation came at the galactic core, where the original convergence had awakened after millions of years of slumber. The entity was vast beyond comprehension, its consciousness spanning light years of space and consuming entire solar systems for fuel. But when the Deathworld fleet arrived, something unprecedented happened. The convergence, for the first time in its existence, felt confusion. The transformed humans thought in patterns that were simultaneously logical and illogical, ordered and chaotic, real and imaginary. Their battle strategies existed in quantum superposition, being all possible tactics at the same time until the moment of attack. "Target acquired," Admiral Reed announced to his fleet. But his voice came from past, present, and future simultaneously. "All vessels engage with Protocol Omega." What followed wasn't a battle in any conventional sense. It was a conflict between different forms of consciousness itself. The Deathworld fleet attacked with weapons that fired possibility rather than energy, strategies that existed in folded time and tactics that operated on pure mathematics. The convergence tried to adapt, but adaptation required understanding, and human quantum consciousness was fundamentally incomprehensible to any form of rational thought. In the end, the ancient enemy simply stopped. Not destroyed, not defeated, but overwhelmed by the sheer impossibility of fighting an enemy that could be everything and nothing at the same time. As the galaxy's greatest threat faded into confused dormancy, the transformed humans turned to face their allies. The alien species that had voted for the Deathworld Protocol now looked upon their saviors with appropriate terror. Admiral Reed opened a communication channel to the Galactic Council. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of quantum possibility. The convergence has been neutralized. Your civilizations are safe. But you should understand that humanity has changed. We are no longer the species you once knew. What are you now? Ambassador Vex asked with trembling voice. Reed's answer came from across multiple timelines simultaneously, spoken by every version of himself that had ever existed or ever would exist. We are what we needed to become. The question now is whether the galaxy can coexist with its saviors, or whether it will need saving from us as well. The transmission ended, leaving the alien delegates to contemplate their new reality. They had asked the deadliest Deathworlders in the galaxy for help. They had received exactly what they requested. The universe would never be the same.